The Shrinking Man by Richard Matheson. This is episode 47 of a series I'm doing called The Masterpieces of Science Fiction. And this is the 47th book out of 140 that I'm reading in this series. Now, this book was copyright 1956, and I've read a few other books from Richard Matheson, mostly in the kind of horror genre. This book, I would say, is science fiction with horror elements and even some adventure elements thrown in the mix as well. Now, I'll start off with just the plot. This takes place probably around the time when Richard Matheson was writing this, in the 50s, maybe in the 60s. And it's revolving all around our main character, Scott Carey. And in the beginning of the book, he gets exposed to some radioactive insecticide, and what ends up happening is he starts shrinking by 1/7 of an inch per day. So in 1 week, he's gonna shrink by 1 inch, and it's done kind of proportionally, so he's shrunk down to scale over time is what appears is going to happen. Now, the book is written in a unique way, probably for the 50s, where it kind of jumps in timelines. So you kind of see what happened to him when he was exposed to this gas, and then you see him when he's really small. He's kind of in a predicament, and this is kind of like the modern day. This is the real timeline of the story. And then throughout the book, he's thinking back to this whole process that he's been going through as he's been shrinking from an average sized person down to the size of like an ant, you know. And the narrative structure was probably a bit ahead of its time. I haven't read many books from this time period that were done like this. And it was done really well. He wrote the book really well. The suspense and everything where you're unraveling the story was done great. Also, within these chapters, sometimes when he's thinking back, there'll just be like a number, like 21 inches. So he's thinking back to when he was about 21 inches and what he was going through at that time. So the narrative structure was just done awesome, and it kept you invested. It kept me invested in the book the whole way through, because the tale was weaved together, and you were always kind of trying to figure out not only what got him there, but ultimately he's on this countdown, and he knows once he gets to 0 that he could possibly just die, because this happens almost like clockwork. 1/7 of an inch a day he loses. And yeah, so that's kind of the main setup of the book, or the overall story outline. Now, what I didn't really expect about this book is it really uses this kind of iffy science fiction premise, because there isn't a lot of time really spent describing how this would work, or it's not very plausible at all. We kind of know that. But it's used to go over some themes about our main character. And as he's shrinking, he's losing parts of his masculinity, parts of his humanity. It's driving him crazy. It's doing all these things to him. And I personally think the joy of reading this book is to watch his progress over time and the ups and downs that he goes through as he's going through this. And as he's thinking back and seeing some of the difficulties that he went through, to where he becomes a size of, a small insect, where he's, battling spiders and things like that. So that's kind of the main overview of the book. You do spend a lot of time with some battle scenes with him and these spiders and some things like that are a little bit more, I wouldn't really call them pulpy or anything, but it's more, I got the sense of some adventure story being told within some of these deeper themes and some of these psychological things that are going through our character's head. So let's just go into some pros and cons. The pros for me are definitely Matheson's writing and the way he structured this novel and did these kind of flashbacks and the way he unraveled the story as you go through. I was always wanting to read more in this book to try to kind of figure out what was going on and what was going to happen ultimately to our character, what got him to this point where he was kind of losing his mind, losing his humanity, and it was done really well. So number one pro for me is that. The story and the premise was good. It was, like I said, a little implausible, but it really did get more into the characters that I thought, and especially into the head of our main character, and to see everything that was going through his head and how he was reacting to some of these things that he was going through. So that was another big pro for me and something I really didn't expect. Now, if we get into some cons, there weren't a lot of cons for me in this book. This was a short, easy read. It was like right around 200 pages. There were a few things that I think I have to mention. They could be considered kind of creepy to some people. There was a few scenes, like one scene when he's about the size of maybe like a 12-year-old, somewhere around there. He was out still driving around because, he's an adult, and he ends up breaking down, and he ends up getting picked up by this guy who is drinking whiskey and smoking cigars, and it starts to get real creepy. He's kind of touching our main character, and you see what's going on in our main character's head, because even though he looks like a child, he's a full-fledged adult with all the history in his head of the world experience, everything that he's known as an adult, yet knows that he looks like a kid to this creep. And so there's a creepy scene there. There's also another scene where our main character, they have a child, and she has a babysitter, and he's kind of, at this point, he's lost some of his sense of masculinity. He's too small to have any kind of sexual relations with his wife. It's kind of creepy even for her, because it's like he looks like a child. And so he was leering at this kind of underage babysitter, and there was a lot going on in his mind during that section. And then there was another section where they went to kind of this like carnival, and one of the performers was like a small person, and there was like some connection he made there because of their size and some things going on there. But, these sections might have seemed a little creepy, but they were really, you can tell he really put them in to kind of show you what was going on through our character's head. It did serve a point to the story, to the plot. It wasn't just thrown in for no reason or just thrown in for some shock value or anything like that. So Matheson, I feel like he was really getting at something with these scenes, trying to show you a little bit more inside our main character's head and what he was going through. So, but I do feel like I need to mention those because they could be cons to some people more than others. It didn't affect me. I felt like they fit in with the story, so it wasn't that bad. But it's nothing you're gonna, if you've read anything from Stephen King or anything from this timeline, you're gonna get some of this stuff. So just be aware. So overall, this book was great. It surprised me in some ways, and overall, I think I'm gonna give it a 4. And if you haven't checked this one out and you're into classic science fiction, you don't mind a little bit of horror elements and kind of a character study on this guy and his demise, then check it out. The ending is good. It's unpredictable. I didn't really predict how the book was going to end. Might be a little bit on the abrupt side, but I was satisfied with the ending, satisfied with the book in general. And like I said, check it out if you haven't read it before. Next up, I'm reading The Palace of Eternity by Bob Shaw. So just keep an eye out for that review coming up next. And once again, thanks for watching.